Lili, como Faba Madio, Atangman Biafa, one more. Rainbow, you eating a lot of gun. Rainbow, I am Faba, when no one. Forget the Tilly, como Faba Madio, Atangman Biafa, one more. Rainbow, you eating a lot of gun. Rainbow, I am Faba, when no one. Bimras America, Bimras Asia, Bimras Europa, Minibras Africa, Lili, como Faba Madio, Atangman Biafa, one more. Rainbow, you eating a lot of gun. Rainbow, I am Faba, when no one. Forget the Tilly, como Faba Madio, Atangman Biafa, one more. Rainbow, you eating a lot of gun. Rainbow, I am Faba, when no one. Bimras America, Bimras Asia, Bimras Europa, Minibras Africa, Rainbow, you eating a lot of gun. Rainbow, I am Faba, when no one. Rainbow, you eating a lot of gun. Rainbow, I am Faba, when no one. Lili, como Faba Madio, Atangman Biafa, one more. Rainbow, you eating a lot of gun. Rainbow, I am Faba, when no one. Forget the Tilly, como Faba Madio, Atangman Biafa, one more. Rainbow, you eating a lot of gun. Rainbow, I am Faba, when no one. Bimras America, Bimras Asia, Bimras Europa, Minibras Africa, Rainbow, you eating a lot of gun. Rainbow, I am Faba, when no one. Rainbow, you eating a lot of gun. Rainbow, I am Faba, when no one. Lili, como Faba Madio, Atangman Biafa, one more. Rainbow, you eating a lot of gun. Rainbow, I am Faba, when no one. Forget the Tilly, como Faba Madio, Atangman Biafa, one more. Rainbow, you eating a lot of gun. Rainbow, I am Faba, when no one. mini brasa Africa, Branca Bamfabu, Brango Yuri Mingalora Rodan, Brango Haya Bamfabutan, Bragna Woman, Brango Yuri Mingalora Rodan, Brango Haya Bamfabutan, Bragna Woman, Bragna Lili, Apomo Faba Madio. Akan mati kebiasa, pun Brembo yuri bingalore bukan, Brembo haya banfarotan, Bremna unu. Begini tidak, kamu faham macio, akan mati kebiasa, pun Brembo yuri bingalore bukan, Brembo haya banfarotan. Bimrasa Amerika, Branca Bamfabu, Bimrasa Asia, Branca Bamfabu, Bimrasa Eropa, Branca Bamfabu, Bimrasa Afrika, Branca Bamfabu, Brango Yuri Mingalore Rodan, Brango Haya Bamfabutan, Bragna Unu, Brango Yuri Mingalore Rodan, Brango Haya Bamfabutan, Bragna Unu, Bragna Lili, Omo Faba Madio, Akan Mani Biafa, One more. Brembo yuri bingalore bukan, Brembo haya banfabutan, Bremna unu. Begini tidak, kamu faham macio, akan mati kebiasa, pun Brembo yuri bingalore bukan, Brembo haya banfabutan, Bremna unu.
All right. Greetings and Sumna. Kumama, welcome. Abala Aka. So, let me see. All right. So, we'll see who shows up for tonight, but I am recording and I'm going to go ahead and get started. And today is a very grand, special day. And I'm going to explain why to start off the meeting. So, in Guinea-Bissau, today is like Memorial Day. And so as a result, I started off the day in this memorial mode. Hold on, I'm messing around with my technology here for a minute. So let me share my screen here for a moment. Share. All right. So today, again, is Memorial Day in Guinea-Bissau. So I started off this morning. Zambikte and I wanted to do the traditional Guinean activity of laying a wreath on the memorial of our loved lost ones. And so here you can see I have the red, gold, and green wreath with the black star, the flag of Guinea-Bissau. in front of the portrait of my now father-in-law, Dr. Kumbayala. And so the first thing we did this morning was go to Amora, the national fort, where the heroes of Guinea-Bissau are laid to rest. Amilcar Cabral is there, along with the various presidents. So we went there, and here is Sambikte at her father's memorial, paying respects. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to go in because of the political situation here in Guinea-Bissau. So the public was not allowed to go into what is essentially National Heroes Park. But as Sambikte is well known here, she was allowed to go in and put her wreath on her father's memorial. She is there. So that was also the start of this morning. Now, the other reason this is an important day is because today is the 95th coronation. Share my screen. Let me share the sound. There we go. The 95th anniversary of the coronation of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I, who you should know as Emperor of Ethiopia. And you may wonder, what does this have to do with Balanta people? And I will explain that in a minute. But by way of a history lesson, I'm just going to show
Project 67 presents The Conquering Lion of Judah, a profile study of His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie the First, Emperor of Ethiopia. He became emperor on November 2nd, 1930, and was crowned Haile Selassie I, King of Kings, King of Zion, conquering lion of the seed of Judah, power of the Trinity.
Your Imperial Majesty, you were 39 years old when you were crowned in 1930.
Yes.
Could you talk a bit about the day of the coronation?
Yes, my coronation day was very memorable to me. Not only we had Ethiopian participants in the event, but also a lot of foreign emissaries partook in the celebration of the coronation day.
The Lion of Judah has carried out a program of modernization and of political and social reform, and has begun to westernize the 2,000-year-old Coptic Christian Ethiopia. He created a strong, centralized monarchy. The country, with its 22 million people, revolves around his personal rule.
You are descended, Your Imperial Majesty, from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba.
This is just our story, ancient story. The Queen of Sheba, she go to visit Solomon, King Solomon. She met one son. She returned back to her country. Our story says since that time we son from King Solomon comes.
Haile Selassie comes from a line that traditionally sprang from the admiring visit of Makeda, the Queen of Sheba, to King Solomon. She, an Arabian queen, went to Jerusalem to test the wisdom of Solomon, who was said to be the wisest of the kings of Israel, about 950 years before Christ. In the scriptures, the book of 2 Chronicles tells that King Solomon gave to the Queen of Sheba all her desire. The traditional story holds that Menelik, son of their romance, went to the state of Aksum, which is Sheba, or Shoa, as it is called today, and which is the main province of Ethiopia, and became the first Ethiopian emperor. This, for the Ethiopian Amharic Christians who came originally from Arabia, is the beginning of their royal line. Began to prepare for the impressive event of the morning. The Emperor and Empress Manen had already spent the hours since the night before in prayer and meditation with the priests at the most holy altar within St. George's Cathedral, the largest church in the capital. Through the early morning, the chanting of priests continued. Outside the church, and nearly all over Addis Ababa, devoted subjects were dancing and chanting praise songs for the new emperor in Amharic.
The son of Ras Makonnen, Haile Selassie, will feed us. His justice is like that of an angel. May God give long life to Haile Selassie, the child of our country. Spiritual vestment is worn by the Archangel Michael. The precious chasuble is worn by Michael. Spiritual vestment is worn by the Archangel Michael. The precious chasuble is worn by Michael. Spiritual vestment is worn by the Archangel Michael. The precious chasuble is worn by Michael. Spiritual vestment is worn by the Archangel Michael. The precious chasuble is worn by Michael.
The emperor was then vested with the 7 ornaments of the coronation, including his gold sword studded with precious stones, a diamond-encrusted ring, 2 traditional lances, the imperial scepter, and a golden globe of the earth, the imperial vestments, and at last came the magnificent crown. The integrity of Ethiopia. The emperor and empress, who was also crowned, but with less elaborate rites. They were escorted by the priests and bishops, princes and high dignitaries, Ethiopian bishops and priests from all over Ethiopia, and a large number of Coptic deacons, carrying palm branches and chanting in mighty volume.
Hosanna, blessed be the King of Israel. Blessed is he who cometh in the name of the Lord.
All right. So, what does all of this have to do with Balanta and what's going on today? So let me back up and let me show you. Let me explain. So first off, let me back up. I think everyone has heard of Richard Allen, who founded the first Black African church in the United States in 1789, the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And so these were the first Black people who, in their captivity, in their enslavement, breaking free and reading the Bible through an African or Ethiopian lens. So my great-granduncle Eustace, right here, he was the 44th pastor of the AME Mother Church. This is my great-granduncle Eustace right there. He was pastor of that church from 1942 to 1950. Okay? Now, what does all of this have to do with Haile Selassie, Balanta, why we're meeting? All right. So let us go take a little bit of a look at history and how we are all connected. So we start here, and then we're going to get to what's going on in Guinea-Bissau today. All right, back up. So 1892, Lige Tafari Makonnen, who later became Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, was born on July 23rd, 1892. All right, 1892. Now, within a year of his birth, okay, is the Chicago Congress on Africa that was held in Chicago during the World's Columbian Exposition. This event brought together individuals of African descent from both the United States and other parts of the world, including Alexander Crummell, Bishop Henry Turner, Bishop Alexander Walters of the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, the AME Church, okay, who 7 years later would chair the London Congress on Africa. This was the beginning of the Pan-African movement. So Rastafari is born in 1892. Within 1 year, the Pan-African movement is formally started at the Chicago Congress on Africa. Okay? After that meeting in Chicago, they had another meeting 2 years later. Another Pan-African repatriation plan was initiated by Black businessman William Ellis, who backed the efforts of Georgia preachers Henry McNeil Turner. So this idea of repatriation starts the year after Rastafari is born, is presented at the Chicago Congress of Africa, becomes a theme 2 years later at the Atlanta Congress of Africa. Okay. At that Congress, Bishop Turner gave an address on the American and his fatherland. Then, within a year, the Italians invade Ethiopia in the First Italian-Ethiopian War, the Battle of Adwa. Okay? Somehow, the Ethiopians win, and that victory then becomes the symbol of Pan-Africanism and the idea that African people can liberate themselves from foreign domination of the European powers, including the British colonies, which became the United States. Okay? Now, 1897, Benito Sylvan, a Haitian, right? He becomes the aide-de-camp in Emperor Menelik's court. Rastafari's father is his commander of the army. Okay, and then a year after that, my great-great-grandfather, John Addison Blake, founds and builds the Union Bethel African Methodist Church in Cary, North Carolina, which is still standing today. So I'm showing you how there is running through my bloodline, right, this spiritual call, right, to lead congregations. Okay, it runs through my paternal bloodline. All right. 5 years after this, Benito Silvan goes to Ethiopia. He introduces William Ellis, who's talking about a repatriation plan, to Emperor Menelik II, and he tells the emperor, Europe for Europeans and Africa for Africans. Okay. Then in 1909, Robert Daniel Alexander moves from Missouri, which is where I lived, to Chicago, and from Chicago moves to Ethiopia and becomes the first repatriate on record in Ethiopia in this new repatriation movement. He is the first descendant of people trafficked from Africa and enslaved in the Americas to repatriate to Ethiopia. He provides Emperor Menelik with copies of the Black-owned Chicago Defender newspaper. Okay? All right. Then, in 1917, a Black man named Charles Henry Holmes wrote a book called Ethiopia, the Land of Promise, a book with a purpose. Okay? The book was a novel best described as visionary prophetic fiction. In the book, 5 Black men had strange dreams which caused them to all meet together on May 5th. One of the dreams pictured Black soldiers and a red, gold, and green flag. The men began meeting on the 5th of every month and realized that their dream was about forming an organization, the Ethiopian Union, in order to combat and conquer Jim Crowism in America. Amazingly, actual Ethiopian events happened exactly as was described on May 5th, 1936, the day Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie left Ethiopia to go to the League of Nations. And on May 5th, 1941, exactly 5 years later, the day that Haile Selassie returned to Ethiopia and regained his throne, and there were these parades with soldiers with the flags, just as it was envisioned and written in a book, how many years before it actually happened. Now, here's the key part. In 1919, Rastafari, before that coronation ceremony that we just witnessed, okay, he's not the emperor yet. He's regent and plenipotentiary. He's heir to the throne. He's sitting under Queen Zalditu, and he's destined to become the emperor. But at this point, he's just regent and plenipotentiary. He sends what became known as the Abyssinian Mission, which goes to my hometown of Chicago in 1919, to fulfill the prophecies in Isaiah 18:1-7, that the prophet Zephaniah also revealed the meaning of this. So what are we talking about? Watch this. Let's go and check this out. All right. So here we have here, right? 1919, Regent Plenipotentiary Rastafari sent 4 ambassadors by the way of the ocean to the United States. The Royal Ethiopian Mission included Dejajmach Nadiao, Emperor Zalditu's nephew and commander of the Imperial Army, Atto Balangeta Hirore Wolde Selassie, mayor of Addis Ababa, Atto Kantiba Gabro, mayor of Gondar, and Atto Sinkas, secretary of the commander of the Imperial Army. Okay. Their purpose was to renew a treaty of friendship with the United States signed by Emperor Menelik in 1904. In honor of their visit, the Ethiopian flag was ceremoniously hoisted over the White House. Imagine that. An African flag is now flying over the White House. First and only time. Here you have the Chicago Defender newspaper, and it says right there, Abyssinian Mission arrives in U.S., and there's a picture of the 4 Ethiopians. They go to Chicago, my hometown. Okay. Now, during that same year that the Abyssinian Mission came, a Black man from Chicago named Reverend James Morris Webb published a treatise entitled "A Black Man Will Be the Coming Universal King, Proven by Biblical History." Reverend Webb's prophecies were based on the 4th chapter of Micah, the 3rd chapter of Habakkuk, and the 3rd chapter of Joel. Okay, so this is what's being reported in the newspapers in Chicago in 1919, talking about coming of a universal black king. And you have this man over here, Grover Redding, going around Chicago, preaching, right, that the visit of those 4 Ethiopians fulfilled Isaiah 18, 1 through 7, which reads, "Woe to the land shadowing with wings, which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, that sendeth ambassadors by the sea." All right, stop there. Okay. Woe to the land shadowing with wings. What is the symbol of America? It's an eagle, right? The eagle, with the great wings. This land which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. So the river of Ethiopia is what? Nile, the Nile River. So you have to go past the Nile River. What's the next great body of water? The Atlantic Ocean. That sendeth ambassadors by the sea. There was no airplanes then. Those 4 Ethiopians came by way of a boat, by the water, saying, "Go ye swift messengers to a nation scattered and peeled, to a people terrible from their beginning, hitherto a nation meted out and trodden down, whose land the rivers have spoiled." All right, so America is a spoiled nation, okay? It become a great nation, is a spoiled nation. Now, who is a nation that is scattered and peeled, terrible from their beginning, if not the descendants of those people who were captured as prisoners of war, trafficked across the waters beyond Ethiopia, and enslaved in the Americas? "All ye inhabitants of the world and dwellers on the earth, see, when he lifteth up an ensign on the mountains." That's the Ethiopian flag on the White House. An ensign is a flag. "In that time shall the present be brought unto the Lord of hosts of a people scattered and peeled, and from a people terrible from their beginning hitherto, a nation meted out and trodden underfoot, whose land the rivers have spoiled, to the place of the name of the Lord of hosts, the Mount Zion." So this is a prophecy in Isaiah that's talking about how ambassadors from Ethiopia are going to come to an enslaved, scattered, and terrible people, and somehow they're going to be presented as a gift to the Lord in Zion. This is a biblical prophecy talking about what? Repatriation of our ancestors. And it's a black man in Chicago in 1919 that is preaching this. 2 black men. Okay? Now, Grover Redding, in addition to Isaiah, he says, if you want to understand all of that, then you have to read the prophet Zephaniah, who said, "Woe to her that is filthy and polluted, to the oppressing city. Therefore wait ye upon me, saith the Lord, until the day that I rise up to the prey, for my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, to pour upon them mine indignation, even all my fierce anger, for all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may call upon the name of the Lord, to serve him with one consent." And it continues, "I will take, in that day, I will take away out of the midst of thee them that rejoice in thy pride. I will also leave in the midst of thee an afflicted and poor people, and they shall trust in the name of the Lord. I will gather them that are sorrowful for the solemn assembly, who are of thee, to whom the reproach of it was a burden. I will undo all that afflict thee. I will get these people, these new people, praise and fame in every land where they have been put to shame. At that time I will bring you again, even in the time that I gather you, for I will make you a name and a praise among all the people of the earth, when I turn back your captivity." All right. So this is what is being preached in my hometown in Chicago in 1919. That there's going to be a coming of a universal black king. He's going to call all the nations together. He's going to judge them with the breath of his lips and the words of his mouth, pour out the indignities. Those nations are going to be judged. And then when that happens, he's going to gather a remnant and bring them back to where they came from and bring them back to Zion, bring them back as a gift unto God. Now, at that time, the prophet Redding started an organization called the Star Order of Ethiopia and Ethiopian Mission to Abyssinia, right? He studied the Treaty of Friendship, and he realized that Article 1 and Article 2 said that Ethiopian citizens had to be treated with full rights, right, in America, and American citizens in Ethiopia had to be treated with full rights. And when he read that, he realized that being an Ethiopian citizen meant that he would be treated better than the black man in America who is suffering under Jim Crow. So he decides he's going to renounce his Jim Crow American citizenship and become an Ethiopian citizen. So what does he do? He organizes a parade. He studies this Treaty of Friendship. He organizes a parade, right? In the parade, he burns a U.S. flag. He pledges allegiance to the government of Rastafari. And in that way, declares himself an Ethiopian citizen, because how else are you going to become an Ethiopian citizen in Jim Crow America? How are you going to renounce your status in America? When that happened, a gun battle broke out. Police officer died. And this is how the Rastafari movement started in Chicago. Didn't start in Jamaica. Didn't start when His Majesty was crowned King of Kings. The reason why the movement is called Rastafari is because it started in Chicago with this group of people who pledged allegiance to the government of Rastafari and were preparing themselves to repatriate back to their ancestral homeland. At that time in 1919, as regent and plenipotentiary Rastafari, he made the first repatriation offer and invited Black people to return home. Okay? Now, fast forward a little bit. Okay. Here you have newspaper accounts, the fatal ending of the Abyssinian parade, right? How the Rastafari movement started in my hometown. You have the commission investigating race religions in Chicago that refers to the Rastafarites and how these people were sick and tired of their life in America and wanted to go back to their ancestral homeland. Okay. Now, fast forward. Okay, we're going to fast forward past this. Want to get to, I'm going to explain what this has to do with Balanta, Guinea-Bissau, right now. Okay, all of this is history. You can read all of this. But after Rastafari came to Chicago and offered repatriation, he comes to Chicago again in 1954. Okay, so he gets crowned King of Kings, is revealed to the world. He fulfills the biblical prophecies. Look, here you have it, Chicago Defender. Okay, my hometown again, right? The Chicago Defender of November 8, 1930, showing Rastafari with the caption crowned King of Kings. So my people were like, hey, biblical prophecy fulfilled, King of Kings. This is the time we're supposed to leave America and repatriate home. Okay, even W.E. Du Bois was talking about this at that time in his newspaper, right? The Crisis magazine. Here's a picture of the Crisis magazine. The whole world is talking about this. Okay, Malcolm X's father, right? I won't even give it into that. Even though one of our members is kin to Malcolm X, he's a Balanta member of our society. I'll deal with that another time. All right. All right. So Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie saw the need to recognize the incoming repatriates as citizens of Ethiopia. So after he's crowned King of Kings, Lord of Lords, conquering Lion of Judah, reveals to the world, right, the Messiah has come. He revises the 1931 Constitution under Section 9, Nationality 12.2, where he provides for the citizenship of the Black people of the West. And in that section, it says, if the imperial Ethiopian government deems any foreigner who applies for Ethiopian citizenship to be of value, or it finds other special reason which convinces it that the applicant should be granted citizenship, it may grant him or her Ethiopian citizenship, even if he or she does not fill the residency and language requirements. So he's setting the precedent to say, look, we can expedite your citizenship for Afro-descendants if there's a special reason, okay? And he starts doing this in 1931. You have 100 Africans, Black people from America and the Caribbean who are already in Ethiopia at this time. And then, right, you have the peace movement of Ethiopia is established once again in Chicago by Miss Gordon. The Chicago Defender newspaper describes their purpose as repatriating all unemployed, hopeless Negroes to be returned to Africa, where they can develop themselves in a country under Black leadership, where their opportunities will not be limited, and where there are thousands of others who desire to be free from slavery. Petitions containing the names of 400,000 members of the race were sent to President Roosevelt. The peace movement of Ethiopia was successful in getting the Virginia legislatures to pass a resolution endorsing the repatriation of people of African descent. This is 1932. And then the Italians, 1935, they invade Ethiopia, trying to conquer and destroy it. Okay, they invade Ethiopia. 5,000 Black men from Chicago volunteer to defend Ethiopia. The Chicago Defender newspaper, June 15, 1935, quote, "I am not only Emperor of Africa, I am king of all Negroes everywhere, including those in the United States." Was that true? Yes, because guess what? There's no other free independent kingdoms left in Africa. We only have one king left. It's Emperor Haile Selassie, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. Okay? It's not me saying this. This is history. Okay? I'm just reporting to you what's being said in history. Okay? So I'm going to skip the war. All of that is prophecy. Okay? I'm going to skip over a whole heap of history, but here you have it. Right? In Chicago, 5,000 Black men volunteered to defend Ethiopia. The government, the United States government, prevents all of these Black men from Chicago from going, except Colonel John C. Robinson from Chicago, who becomes the emperor's pilot because he was one of the first Tuskegee Airmen, and the emperor needed a Black pilot. So as a Black man from Chicago becomes the pilot during the war for Emperor Haile Selassie. So if you haven't noticed by now, there's an Ethiopia to Chicago connection. And whenever the emperor really needs something to deal with repatriation, he chooses someone from Chicago. Okay? So let me fast forward, because we're going to catch up to today. I'm going to relate all of this. Okay? You have the Battle of Armageddon, June 30th, 1936, the day Haile Selassie goes to the League of Nations, right? Revelations talks about this, says the King of Kings will judge them with the breath of his lips and the words of his mouth when the kings are gathered in one assembly. Well, the League of Nations was the first time where all the heads of state of the world were gathered in one assembly, right? If you want to get all this story, you can read all this, but I need to get to 1954. Okay? Just bear with me. Want to get to 1954. All right. World War II breaks out because of all of this, right? Haile Selassie regains his throne. Right. So let's go here. Okay. It's after the war. Okay. 1954. Haile Selassie is now trying to rebuild his kingdom. All of this is documented in the book, the 50th anniversary of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie's first visit to the United States, right? He came in 1954, and in 2004, somebody with the name Ross Nathaniel published this book. Somebody named Ross Nathaniel published a book to commemorate the 50-year anniversary of Haile Selassie, the first visit of an African emperor to the United States. Okay? And in that book, you see Chicago Defender, Haile Selassie's special message for Negroes. That's us, the Black people. Okay? Emperor Selassie links the Negroes with Africans throughout the world. All of this is taking place in Chicago. Okay? Ethiopian emperor is Chicago's king for a day. I'm not making this up. Is the newspaper reporting this? Okay? Now, during that visit, Haile Selassie goes to Chicago. He has a meeting with 1,000 of Chicago's top business and civic leaders. And then this gets published. jobs go begging, so Ethiopia must add other inducements. In which he said on June 8th, 2004, right, he offered repatriation, he offered citizenship, paid transportation, a house rent-free, competitive salary, paid 3 months vacation, and return flights to the United States and back to Ethiopia, right? So that we would come and rebuild Ethiopia. This is 1954, okay? This was what the United States government didn't want you to know. So the United States government called the State Department, called the Supreme Court, said, pass the Brown versus Board of Education decision, right? We want you to pass this decision just before the emperor comes, and the press, you're only allowed to ask the emperor, right, what does he think about the Brown versus Board of Education decision? So it was orchestrated, right? The whole thing, they wanted, in order to stop us from repatriating, right, to our African homelands, right, they passed the Brown versus Board of Education decision so that we think that we have some hope that we could integrate into America and that things could get better, okay? So all of this stuff happening in Chicago on June 8th, 1954. Now, wait a minute. Let's go back up to the top here. June 8th, 1954, the most important day in the 20th century African history, because why? The King of Kings and Lord of Lords comes back to America to gather his people, just like Isaiah, just like Zephaniah prophesied, okay? Now, when you read this book, it says, Jubilee greetings and Rastafari blessings from Chicago on June 8th, 2004, 1,189 days before the Ethiopian millennium. Exactly 50 years ago today, Haile Selassie I came to Chicago and made an unscheduled visit to the South Side to visit South Park Baptist Church, 3722 South King Drive. I, Ross Nathaniel, and Sister Myra decided it was important to go to the church in an attempt to get a touch, an insight, an inspiration from remembering him's presence at that very spot exactly one Jubilee later. Now remember, those of you who are into Christianity and Bibles and all of that, in the Bible there's this concept of a Jubilee year, meaning after 7 cycles of 7 years, 7 times 7, that's 49, the following year, the 58th year, is a Jubilee year where all debts are forgiven, sins are, it's a clean slate, okay? So, on June 8th, 2004, exactly 50 years to when the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, went to South Park Baptist Church at 3722 South King Drive. On that day, 2 people went to that exact spot to celebrate the Jubilee commemoration of the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, offering repatriation to the Black people of the West. Ross Nathaniel and Sister Myra. Now, on that day, our visit was all the more significant due to the fact that this morning at 6:05 a.m., the morning of June 8th, 2004, at 6:05 a.m., at that very spot where Haile Selassie came, Ross Nathaniel and Sister Myra were there waiting. And at that moment, the path of Venus directly crossed over the disk of the sun, an event known as the Venus transit. This event happens every 130 years. And according to Kiera Windrider of the Global Oneness Foundation, the energies of the sun and Venus blend together, and as these blended radiations make their way into the Earth's electromagnetic fields, it weaves the energies of love and unity into the mass consciousness of the planet and potentially into the hearts of every man, woman, and child. Meanwhile, during what was called the astronomical event of the year, Carl Johan Kaliman, PhD, says it is hard to avoid the impression that the very transit of Venus across the sun has somehow served to concentrate these energies and has sent an intensifying beam to planet Earth. During the Venus transit, the cosmic energies were thus strongly amplified. There are, however, many good reasons to believe that the Venus transit on June 8, 2004 will herald a development of communication between human beings that is not based on technology. The chief reason is that we are now at an age that favors the right brain half and the intuitive faculties of our mind that are mediated by this. And so we may expect that the upcoming Venus transit will launch an era of communications utilizing mental rather than electromagnetic fields. Since there is no person alive today who was born in 1882 or earlier, the Venus transit in 2004 will be everyone's first such experience. What may we then expect from this occurrence? So let me stop there for a minute and explain, right? What does that have to do with Balanta people in Guinea-Bissau and the citizenships that were just granted this week? Is because on that particular day, at that moment, out of 8 billion people on the planet, there were only 2 people who were in the spot where God manifested in the flesh as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, who remembered that it happened and who were there with the intention of remembering, and a beam of light from the celestial beings came to that spot, to that person, to give that person special communications. And as many of you know, 2 years after that, I was given the name Siphiwe Baleka, which means gift of the Creator. There is a reason why I'm involved in everything having to do with repatriation and citizenship for our people, because this was the plan of Rastafari. This is the reason that you have an entire Rastafari movement, right? And so ever since then, Rastafari, he needed someone from Chicago to fulfill a mission. Now, many of you know, at one time I was known as Ras Nathaniel. I wore the covenant of dreadlocks. And when Haile Selassie formed the Organization of African Unity, when that Organization of African Unity, based in Addis Ababa, reinvented itself as the African Union, and this time amended its constitution to include Afrodescendant people, there was one Afrodescendant in Addis Ababa in the African Union to represent the Afrodescendant people. And it was this same Ras Nathaniel who was there at the Venus transit celebrating the Jubilee, right? Who is the same Ras Nathaniel that is now in Guinea-Bissau in the name Siphiwe Baleka, getting citizenship. Who is the same Ras Nathaniel, now known as Siphiwe Baleka, that is now petitioning President Traore on behalf of the Afro-descendants of Burkinabe origin, is the same one that has submitted a petition to the president of Sierra Leone for the Mende, Temne, and Limba people, right? Those descendants, everywhere you go. So I am revealing now, right, part of this reason. What does it have to do with Balanta in Guinea-Bissau today? Well, for some reason, I got sent not to go to Ethiopia, but to go to Guinea-Bissau and bring our people who are descendants, not just Balanta, but Fula, Jola, anybody of Guinean origin. Now, let me stop there for a minute, because I have more for tonight to talk about what's going on right now in Guinea-Bissau and why this is a great moment for Balanta people. But let me stop there. I have Raul and Ed are with us tonight. If anybody wants to make a comment, ask a question, whatever, you can open your mic. We can have a conversation about what I've presented so far, and then we'll get to what is actually going on in Guinea-Bissau and how is all of this related.
This is Ed. Good to be with y'all. I just had a quick comment. I'm only able to jump in and off here today due to some other commitments, but I'm just curious. It did indicate that the meeting today was being recorded. Is there any way to access that in its entirety later?
Yeah, that's why I'm recording it for all our members who aren't here. they're going to get the benefit of this reasoning, right? So yeah, it will be posted in our group.
You'll send the link to the recording later.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So Ed, just before you go, let me ask you this. Had you heard any of this narrative before? And when you hear it, what do you think about it?
No, I have not. Did have some past readings indicating that Haile Selassie, of course, wanted to welcome back the diaspora particularly from North America. But the details that you fleshed out and sort of the celestial coordinates that led to everything, I did not know now. But it's very exciting.
Yeah, cool, interesting. All right. Raul, did you want to chime in before I go a little bit further?
No, I actually have kind of the same reaction, and I'm gonna have to go back and read the article because it's a surprising amount of history for something that I personally hadn't heard anything about. So there's a lot in there for me to dig into later.
I will send the links. All of this is posted in various articles on the website, but I'm getting into not only my own personal history, but some deep, deep history and some deep, spiritual history, some deep history as to why certain things are happening right now and why I'm involved, and the fact that you guys are part of that story. It makes it even that much more interesting and bigger. It's like, why is Siphiwe at the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and making these presentations to the world community, and like who am I? I was just some black kid in the cornfields of the Chicago suburbs and stuff. But this is what I mean by understanding, knowing who you are and your place in history. All right, so now watch this. Right now is actually a really exciting and optimistic time for Volanta people. So let me go here. If you were in our group chat, let's go back. I think this was last week. I think I posted this, right? With PAIGC, which is the main political party in Guinea-Bissau. It was the party that led the armed struggle against the Portuguese that liberated Guinea-Bissau. For the first time since the independent Guinea-Bissau, this political party has been barred from the elections, okay? Along with a bunch of other coalitions. It's a setup. The incumbent, I don't like saying President Sissoko because technically he's not the president. He's acting as president because his mandate ran out and he hasn't been removed from office. But I had posted this article and it was talking about, right, it is the absurd becoming normal in our country. One of the presidential candidates, Domingos Pereira, who is now excluded from the ballot, he had said this. So those of you that have been reading these things have been kind of following. Now, in this article, the court did not even have the quorum needed to issue the rulings that eliminated the opposition parties from the ballot, which it blocked Pereira's candidacy, said Imani Umoja, a Central Committee member of the PAIGC. Well, this is Imani Umoja right there, okay? He's with the Central Committee of the PAIGC. There's yours truly, right? I think you recognize that person, yeah. There's me and my lovely wife, right? So the person being quoted in this article, he's standing right there, okay? And next to him is Fernando Diaz, one of the presidential candidates. And you can see he's wearing the red hat of Fernando. So he is Volanta, he's initiated. I had posted this about how hospital workers were striking because they hadn't been paid. Just letting people understand kind of all the things going on, right? All right, then we get to this. So come to find out, Central African Republican ex-president Francois Bozizier is now living in Guinea-Bissau. He's wanted for war crimes. They want to expedite him and try him in Central African Republican. Sissoko has given him sanctuary here. We don't know what's behind that, okay? All right, continuing in our group, right? So the 8 sins of the Supreme Court of Justice. So this was an analysis of how the Supreme Court, who Sissoko put his own people there, these are the 8 violations that they have made that are violations of the law and the Constitution as part of this unfree and unfair election that's going on. Okay, so you can read all of that. It's not me saying it, right? I'm just reporting what experts in the law and the Constitution are saying and what's going on here. Now, then I posted this. Umar Sissoko admits to having ordered the creation of debt in the name of Brahma Camara and the public treasure. So if you read this article, it says that Sissoko Mbalo, in the same speech, admitted to having ordered the withdrawal of the security of then Prime Minister Nuno Gomes Nabian, he's also Balanta, and threatened to arrest Agostinho da Costa, National Secretary of the APU PDGB party. Well, that's Agostinho right there. The person that was threatened to be arrested, that's Agostinho sitting with my wife on my couch. So why am I telling you this? I'm trying to give you a sense of, right now, there is a mixture of fear and optimism in Guinea-Bissau. Fear because there is oppression backed by the military, threats, people are being kidnapped. There's Agostinho, right, on our wedding day, right? People, including high generals in the military, are being disappeared. Journalists are being disappeared. Opposition parties. All right, so then you have me speaking at the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And then the last part, the third part of our wedding, here you see Beto Infante, president of the APU PDGP Framework Forum, right? And you have presidential candidate Fernando Diaz at our wedding, okay? I posted this, public notice, family of Domingos Nyanke demands your immediate release and right of contact. Is another person in the armed forces that went missing, okay? Then they had this big press conference where they said there was an attempted coup, and they, like in the past few days, and they said all these people were involved, and these are people that my wife works with, okay? Then the Council of Ministers approves the citizenship of 8 of our 9 people, right? Now, let me show you this. So yesterday was this official start of the election season, okay? The official start. And all the political parties held rallies. Look at this. This has just come across my feed. The Revolutionary Movement, Dust of the Earth, reported today the abduction of 12 members of the alleged organization, including the General Secretary, Luis Vigario Balanta, by heavily armed men. Okay, so this is a daily occurrence now. So Beto Infante, who is my sponsor and godfather at our marriage, is a well-respected teacher of political science, an international